I got to play Robert Fischer as in Bobby Fischer. Of course, this is a National Master, not the legendary Grandmaster. And I have to show you that game. Now, before we talk about that game, in case you didn't know, this is a series where I'm documenting the whole tournament to show you more than anything the side that nobody shows, the losses, the struggles, and the lessons, of course. So before we go into this very interesting game, let me tell you what happened in the prior rounds. Round one, you already saw it. What happened in that video. Then round two, I lost in the same fashion. Very strong international master. He does a rook lift. I'm thinking you're not going anywhere. Later, I'm lazy. Thank you. As someone said in the comments, you just played lazy chess in round one. And same thing happened in round two. Well, that rook came over eventually and I lost the game. But lesson learned, after those two games, it took me not one loss, but two losses to realize you got to adjust, you got to work harder, you got to calculate more all the time. It's not like in some critical moments, no, all the time, or you won't win this game. Now, the psychological lessons here, number one, I told myself two things. Number one, after that second loss, your mind goes to, ooh, family that you left at home. Why did you come all the way here? But then I told myself, look, if you want to leave, you could leave. Easy flight back home. If you're not going to do it, just forget about it and focus here. And then the one thing that really put me at ease, I told myself, look, worst case scenario, you lose the 9 rounds, and it will be a great experience to tell people, especially if someone is complaining about a tournament, you could tell them, hey, listen, relax. It will never be like the day that I traveled all the way to Charlotte to lose the 9 rounds. But luckily, that put me at ease, I think, and I went on to win my next 2 rounds. The third round, I played a pretty nice game, I think. I got my opponent with a quick tactic and eventually got to queen versus rook and knight. And even though my opponent did sort of like a fortress, I was able to patiently keep calculating and turn the game around. That one, I recorded it with this camera. They allowed me to do so. So you will see the footage at another time. I will also show my game from round two. But that brought me to round four against Bobby Fischer. And let's get to it. There's a lot to learn from this game as well. Number one, I get to the round and my opponent plays e4, d6, d4, knight f6. I know that it is customary to look up your opponent. You get your pairing an hour earlier. This tournament, by the way, there is very well organized. So if the round is at 10:30, by 9:30 you see already who you're playing against. So people have an hour to look you up on the internet and see what you play and so on. So I know they're prepared. I actually looked up my opponent, and the moment you put Robert Fischer on the internet, you don't find him, you find Bobby Fischer. So it's useless. But anyways, I did play here after knight c3. You know that we play the Pierce defense. Now we'll be playing here pawn to g6. But I ended up playing pawn to e5 for a few reasons. Reason number one, I know they're ready for my Pierce defense, and it's tough to play someone who prepared with their engine for the first 20-30 moves, right? So when I played this move, my opponent spent like between 10 and 15 minutes here. Like, what do I do next, right? Another reason why I played this, thanks to my student Robinson, he actually plays it, and I've been learning it myself and helping him a little bit when he plays his tournament games. So I have a good feeling for it, and I'm thinking, worst case scenario, I get to play c6, and this is looking like the check Pierce from lesson number 51. So I will be in my element one way or another, but it was more like a surprise opening. And after e5, my opponent plays knight f3. This is actually the main move at the master level. At lower levels, people are very inclined to take. Actually, Robinson, he gets a lot in his games. He gets a lot of d takes e5, d takes e5, and even though it looks like black isn't happy because of the king in the center, we're actually very happy here. No queens, we don't mind the king in the center, and we get a very good position. But that's Philly door opening. With that said, my opponent being Bobby Fischer plays knight f3, then knight b to d7, bishop c4. All of this is the main line. And after bishop e7, my opponent plays a4. I know from reviewing this and reviewing games that black typically plays a5. But I'm like, you know what? I'll do it in the next move. Let me castle. My opponent is probably going to castle too. It seems natural. And then I play a5. But my opponent instead says, nope, let me gain more space with a5. And you will never play a5 yourself. And then this was interesting because I told myself, you know what, maybe he's playing too many moves with the pawn in the opening. Maybe this king in the center could be subject to something. So here I spent like 10-15 minutes already not being lazy. And by the way, thank you for all the nice comments, guys, that you put on the videos. I get to see them all, but I cannot reply in the moment, but I see them. Okay, so I'm calculating here. Spend like 10-15 minutes calculating. Hey, what if I take like something like this? What if I take, and then I go knight to e5 with the tempo on the bishop, and then I get the bishop out, something like that, or even knight to c5. I just wanted to try to get some momentum since my opponent hasn't castled. But after calculating there for a little bit, I said, you know what, keep it simple, pawn to c6. But this was not laziness. I calculated. My opponent castles now, and even though I'm not playing the Pierce defense, I did get one of the plans from counterblow. In counterblow, remember, we have this setup, which is not different from this one. And then I said we have these tools, and then you gotta know when to use a plan. Well, here I went ahead and I played knight takes e4. This is actually, I think, the first plan that I shared in counterblow, even though it's not exactly the same opening. And then the idea is, of course, when they take, we got pawn to d5. Needless to say, I had to calculate what if they take on f7 first and so on, but I was happy with that. Give me the bishop pair, my king is gonna be safe, I'm already castled. So my opponent lets me get my material back, and now here, typically people play bishop d3. You see this in so many openings like the Italian game and so on, to preserve the bishop pair. But then after bishop takes, knight f6, I was going to be very happy with this position. Like, this is what I had calculated. I was going to be comfortable at the very least. So my opponent finds actually the computer's top move. He found so many good moves, including bishop b3. Then I take, hitting the knight comes over, I take, pawn takes, and then I get to this position. And I like the fact that we got to these trades, and when the dust settled, it was my turn to move. So that was cool. And of course, feel free to pause the video, pretend like you're playing this in a tournament. How would you go about it? My first candidate move was, hey, what if we trade queens, and then when the rook takes back, like something like this. Let me actually show you. Rook takes, develop my bishop with a tempo. You cannot play f3. If you go to e1, I bring the rook over. You cannot take the pawn. But I figured, you know what, they could just develop their bishop, and it will be tough to play for a win without the queens in such an equal position. So after, and by the way, every calculation that I made here, there was always this move that they had that I didn't like. I didn't like bishop e3. So for that reason, I ended up playing one of the top computer moves, which is bishop c5, just to take care of that bishop e3, letting them decide now what they're going to do. But I got a very active bishop on that diagonal. And actually, you will see how important that bishop became. So my opponent quickly, Bobby Fischer style, went queen h5, putting pressure on my king. And of course, it's putting pressure on f7. Don't forget, long range pieces, they like to work together, and they look for those points of coincidence. Also, there's a hanging piece on c5, and I have to be careful with some silly tactics like e6 and so on. Now, my first impression was, or my first inclination was something simple like queen e7. I defend my bishop. I'm preparing to play bishop e6, and I should be okay. However, I calculated, I spent some time, and I ended up playing another good move here that is a little bit counterintuitive, but it made sense when I thought about it, which is bishop e6 right away. So now I'm telling them, hey, if you don't take me, I want to take that very annoying bishop that you have, ruining your pawn structure. And if you take me, yes, funny pawn structure right here, but look at all this pressure. That this looks like a puzzle rush position already. My arrows. I'm putting pressure on f2. My queen is ready to go to the back rank. I don't think you want this kind of pressure. So of course, my opponent spent a lot of time here, and he ended up playing rook a4. Now, like I told you, when I lost round 2, I lost because my opponent played a rook lift like this one and brought it over. So I'm thinking, nope, no, not again. So I paid attention to it, and of course, I took on b3. Now the pawn structure is ruined on the queen side. And my next move was just queen to d5. All I'm thinking is my pieces are active. You're not taking this pawn. I'm ready to play f5, which is pretty interesting because let's say they do, I don't know, something like h3 and I play f5. My pawn is very well defended. This one is going to fall sooner or later. And they cannot even play en passant because the queen would be hanging on h5, right? So I'm playing d5. I like my queen. I considered queen to d3, but I ended up with queen d5. And my opponent plays actually queen f5. So I'm not getting my f5 move at all. Very uncomfortable. I don't know if, at the moment I'm thinking, I don't know if this is the best move or not, but it is definitely very, very annoying. Now, after queen f5, bishop d4, so the same bishop that I activated a few moves ago is coming now to d4, putting pressure on that pawn. It has to fall, and it is blocking the rook from taking e4 as well. Of course, I had to calculate moves like rook d1. It doesn't work. You have bishop taking on f2, and then you collect the queen. You collect the rook. And at this point, my opponent actually played rook to e1. So he's ready to collect on e4. I took some time, and I ended up playing rook f to e8. I don't want to give him anything. Now, the next move is a very, very important moment because my opponent actually takes on e4, and it is a mistake. So feel free to pause and see how you would continue from here. Why would you play? Well, if you pause the video and you found the move, by the way, my opponent Bobby Fischer, he told me after we were analyzing the game, and he told me, hey, I'm so glad you didn't play this move because that was the end for me. But when you didn't play it, I was very happy to see it, right? Well, I didn't even consider it. I was focused on, should I take on with the bishop? And I'm threatening a discovery on that queen. I am threatening also some attacks on the rook, but also the checkmate on the back rank. I was considering that, or taking with the rook first, and then when I take, I'm also threatening a discovery on the hanging queen. I'm threatening the queen d1 move, right? So that's what I was calculating. Of course, they don't have the time to take the bishop because we take the queen, like simple things like that. But in every single line, my opponent had a simple move like g3, and I think even queen f3, nothing special. But anyhow, the move that I didn't find, and if you found it, congrats, didn't even think of it, was bishop b2, completely winning. Back rank issue, bishop hanging, and then even if they go back to defend, you got rook takes pawn. Give me the queen, or the rook, or the bishop, and if you take, of course, the same checkmate. That was completely winning, didn't see it, and it cannot happen. It cannot happen. Now, at the same time, I also tell myself, look, you cannot find every single good move, right? And also, I was in this mindset that I really like my position. So you start to get a little bit comfortable, and you don't feel the need to look for that really good move, but we have to. At this level, we have to. So we missed that one, but still, taking on e5, we got a good position. Rook takes, bishop takes, and my opponent finds g3. I thought, come on, Bobby, are you gonna find g3? And he found it. Every single move that I didn't want him to play, he played it, even though we were getting low on time already. So g3 was played, and I said, you know what? Forget about it. Keep it simple. Take the pawn on b3. I'm hitting your rook, so you don't really have time to take my bishop. There are some ideas with check on d1 to take your bishop. And for all I know, I got a 3 versus 2 on the queen side. So if this goes to an endgame, that could help me win. Also, pay attention how my bishop has been active all this time. My opponent's bishop never developed. That was a mistake that I made in round 1, round 2, not again. But anyways, rook h4, now my opponent is going aggressive, trying to checkmate me, and I kept it very simple. Check, by the way, the computer liked this, and then queen to d5 check, centralize the queen again. I got my pawn back in shape, or back in the zone, and then at this point, I almost played a move that I knew wasn't good, but I was considering bishop f6, right? Hitting the rook, that queen is pinned, but I really didn't like this idea, right? Where the rook is active, my rook is passive. The only thing I'm thinking at this point is, All right, don't get checkmated, of course. But then what do I need to have a great position? Well, I need to improve this rook, and I need to open up a escape for my king to never have the back rank issues. So I realized, it took me a moment, but I realized this queen cannot really take me because it is pinned, and the rook cannot take because the queen hangs. So I just activated my rook. That's it. I'm thinking maybe this is not the best move, but my pieces are active and this is what I need. So king h3. Now I did the other part, which is pawn to g6, that ideal position that we talk about so much. And then we got queen to e3. My opponent is trying to get on h6. Now I'm not concerned, honestly, because my dark, when I play this move, I know I'm weakening my dark squares, but as long as I have the dark square bishop, I should be fine. Like even if they get to h6 and they take on h7, I just move over. I think I shouldn't be checkmated, but I have to be careful. Anyways, I played queen to b5. So I'm already paying attention to queen f1. I'm already with significant advantage here. But the computer was like, hey man, why didn't you go to h1? And it's even stronger. Well, I didn't want to be too far. Also, I didn't see it. But queen b5, I'm thinking, I'm about to go down there. If you go back like they did, my initial idea was to just take the pawn with the option to go back with check. I just wanted the king to go back to g2 for me to have that easy check to get back in the zone. But as I looked more into it, I looked at rook to d1. Now, here I gotta make a pause. I have a private student that his dad is always with him, Eddie, and we were talking last time about this concept of before you play, look at your captures, your checks, your threats, and I told him, hey, maybe Edward doesn't have to do this. He's so young, so smart. Maybe he doesn't have to do that every move. I don't think I do it. No one that I know does it. But I have to tell him, I realized I'm doing this. Not when I'm going to play, I look at those options. It's more about my opponent's options. Like when I'm going to play my move, like in this case, I wanted to play rook d1. I didn't look at my checks, my captures, and so on. I think that comes pretty intuitively. But I did check for my opponents. So I was like, okay, when I put the rook down there, do they have any checks? Do they have any captures? I was very careful with any funny checks down there. They didn't have it. So this was just, that's it. That was the end. I'm ready to come into f1. Of course, if they come out, I could even play rook to d3, pinning the queen. My opponent finally gets the bishop out to d2, and the bishop only came out to be lost because queen d5 again is check, and then the bishop falls. My opponent resigned. And that was it. This was actually a pretty decent game. We got 91% accuracy, but as you can see, mistakes were made as well. And as you can see, I had to talk to myself in the beginning to put myself at ease. All of that is part of these tournaments, especially when you don't get easy rounds, my friend. Now, speaking of learning lessons, psychology, chess psychology, there's a very, very strong lesson on my next round. You will see that tomorrow. So look for make sure you subscribe, make sure you have the notifications on to get that one, because that one is going to be a very interesting one. With that said, thank you again for all the support, for all the comments, and a lot of the tips that you put in there, I took them to heart and I kept them in mind when I was playing. So thank you for being there.